Hey guys, I'm Matt, a developer from Ohio, and in this video, I'll be walking you through the Veneer project. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with classes, constructors, methods, and properties. Let's get started. In this project, we use classes to build a marketplace for people and organizations to buy and sell art. We'll start by creating a class called art that will represent individual works of art. So we'll use the class keyword to start that, and we'll title it art. Later, we're going to create unique art objects. We'll want to pass in basic information about the artwork, like the artist, title, medium, and year of creation. We can give art a constructor that takes these four attributes as parameters. Remember that a constructor in Python is the init method, which is short for initialization. So we'll define our init method. We'll give it self, like we have to do for every Python method, and then we'll pass in artist, title, medium, and year. Now, these parameters are just that, parameters of the init method. They won't exist outside the scope of this method. So to make their values accessible to the entire art object, we need to assign those values to self, which refers to a specific art object. So we can set self.artist equal to artist. And this is saving this artist to self, which is going to be a specific instance of art. We'll also need to do this for title, medium, and year. When your constructor is done, it should look like this. You should have, for example, self.year equals year. This year is the same one from up here, the parameter. And this year belongs to self and is a property of an art object. Now we'll give the art class a string representation method, REPR for short, much like the init method. The return value of this method will be the string that gets shown in the console when you use print on an art object. We want to print out the artist's name, the title of the work, the year of creation, and the medium, just like shown in the example. So we'll define our representation method, pass in self, as we always have to do for any Python method, and we're going to be returning a string. Now we can use %s here to take the place of a string, and then we'll pass in a value for that later. So this first one is going to be the artist's name. This second one, in quotation marks, is going to be the title of the work. And then we have the medium and the year. And another % symbol, and we can pass in the different strings that we're going to use. So we'll use self.artist, self.title, self.medium, and self.year. Now these are the same things from up here, but they aren't these properties, they're these ones down the side, the ones that belong to self. To test our art class, we can create a new art object. We'll use the four attributes given in this task's instruction to save a new object to the variable girl with mandolin. These four attributes correspond to the parameters in the class constructor. So we'll come out of this method, and we'll save girl with mandolin equal to a new instance of art. And I'm just going to copy these in from the instruction. So the artist's name, and then we'll copy the title of the work, and the year is 1910, and we'll copy in the medium. And again, each one of these corresponds up here. So this is the artist's name, corresponds to artist. The title of the work corresponds to title, and so on. Now, let's print out the new object. Remember that what we want to see is the string we created in the string representation method. So we're going to print out girl with mandolin. And when we hit save, that's what we should see up here. Now that we know our art object is working how we want it, we can move on to the marketplace class, which will handle buying, selling, listing, and delisting of art objects. I'm going to minimize the art class since we're done working on it for now, and it makes the workspace kind of cluttered. So I'll add the next class, marketplace, here below art. Just like with art, marketplace needs a constructor. This constructor isn't going to have any parameters, but that doesn't mean it's useless. We can assign values to self without parameters if we don't need those values to be customizable. In this case, we're going to define self.listings as an empty list, because a new marketplace will always start with no listings. So we'll define our constructor with self and no other parameters, and self.listings is equal to a new empty list. Marketplace is going to need methods for the functionality we described. First is the ability to list a work of art as for sale. we'll define a new method, addListing, that takes one parameter, a new listing, and adds it to the empty self.listings list that we created in the previous task. We can use append to add list items. So we're going to define a new method. We'll define addListing with self, as always, and then new listing. And we're going to add this new listing to self.listings using the append method. And we'll just pass in our new listing. To go with addListing, we need removeListing for when a work of art needs to be taken off the market. We can use remove to remove list items from listings. So we'll define removeListing with self, and this time with expired listing. Again, with self.listings, but this time with the remove function. And we'll pass in our expired listing. The last piece of functionality that Marketplace needs is displaying all the listings. We'll define a showListings method that iterates over self.listings and prints each one to the console. So we'll define the new showListings, pass in just self, and for each listing in self.listings, we'll print that listing out. So this is going to iterate over self.listings, and for every item that it finds in here, we're going to name that listing, and we're going to print that out. So after we add them, we'll have some things in here that we can print out. Just like we did with art, we'll need to instantiate a new Marketplace object and save it to a new variable. Because the constructor for Marketplace has no parameters, we don't need to pass any information in. So at the bottom of our program, we can define Veneer as a new Marketplace. And again, we don't have to pass anything in here. We can use the showListings method from Veneer to print out the listings. So we'll get Veneer.showListings. And this is a call to the showListings method that we made up here. Now, when you run this, nothing shows up in the console, but that's actually what we want to see. Remember that listings was initialized to an empty list. Later, we'll add listings, and this line will be really important in displaying them. Marketplace isn't much good without customers, so we'll define a client class that represents buyers and sellers of art objects. So I'm going to minimize the Marketplace class because we're not working on that right now. And I'll tab all the way back over, define a new class as client. This class needs a constructor just like the previous two. The client constructor will take three parameters: name, location, and a Boolean value representing whether the client is a museum or a collector. Note that the task instruction tells us that self.location should be the string private collection if isMuseum is false. So we'll define our constructor to have self as always, then name, location, and isMuseum. We'll set self.name equal to name and self.isMuseum equal to isMuseum. But then for location, this is going to be a little bit more involved because we need to set it to private collection if isMuseum is false. So if isMuseum, we'll set self.location equal to location, kind of how you'd normally expect. But if that's not the case, we're going to set self.location equal to the string private collection. First client we'll instantiate is Edita Halpert. She's a collector, so isMuseum will be false. Because location will be set to private collection, it doesn't really matter what we put in as the second parameter. Good practice would be to use Python's built-in none object, which is a stand-in for nothing. You can't omit the second parameter, but you can admit that nothing goes there by writing none. So we'll have Edita equals a new client, and we'll set the name here to Edita Halpert, and we'll give the none object for the second parameter because the location is going to be overridden anyways, and we'll say false for isMuseum because this is a person and not a museum. Transaction requires both a buyer and a seller, so we'll create a second client. This one is the Museum of Modern Art, which is a museum, so we need to include the location of New York. So MoMA we can set equal to a new client with MoMA as the name and New York as the location, and this is going to be true because this is a museum. Our client class doesn't have any functionality for transactions, so we'll need to add that in the next few tasks. If you've only been running your code every time you need to see a print statement in the console, it's probably been a while, so make sure you're saving and running regularly. Because we're going to be moving an art object from a seller to a buyer, we need to add the owner attribute to the art class. We can add this as a fifth parameter in the constructor and one additional assignment to self.owner. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize client and open up art. And inside the constructor here, I'll add owner, and I'll also say that self.owner equals owner. So now we have that set up. We also need to update this class's string representation method to include the owner's name and location. Remember that this isn't self.name, but self.owner.name, because name belongs to the client owner, which belongs to the self art object. So we'll add two new strings here. It's going to be the name and then the location. And here, we're going to have to say we want self.owner.name to go in that first spot, and self.owner.location to go in that second spot. Because we've changed the constructor, we'll get an error when we save and run our program. Any instantiation of an art object is going to expect 5 parameters now instead of 4. We're going to add Edita as the owner of girl with mandolin, so we need to move girl with mandolin below Edita and add her as the 5th parameter. So we'll come down here, find girl with mandolin. I'm going to cut that out and paste it down here. And we're going to set Edita as the new owner. Now remember, we have to do this below Edita because if we do it above, we're going to get an error because at that point there is no one named Edita. The corresponding print statement will also need to be moved. We can't print girl with mandolin before instantiating it. So we're also going to cut this and paste it below. Now, when we save this, it should reflect the change that we made to the string representation method of the art class. The owner and location are listed now. We have art, clients, and a marketplace, but we need one last class. Recall that our marketplace class has methods for adding, removing, and showing listings. We're going to add a listing class, which will hold a work of art and contain other info, like the asking price and the seller. So beneath our other classes, we'll define a new class, and this is going to be listing. As usual, our first step is a constructor. We'll add art, price, and seller as parameters, then assign them to self in the body of the constructor. So we'll define our constructor with self, then art, price, and seller, and we'll set self.art equal to art, and so on. The completed constructor should look like this. You should be getting pretty used to this structure by now. The marketplace class prints out listings, so each listing needs a good string representation. We'll return the title of the artwork and the asking price. Remember that the title is owned by self.art, not just self. So we'll define our new string representation method with self as always, and we're going to return a string, and this is going to have two strings in it, the first being the title of the artwork, and the second one being the price. Then we'll use string interpolation to pass in self.art.title, and also self.price. Everything is in place with the marketplace, listings, and art. What we're missing is the ability for clients to buy and sell the art that they own. We'll add a sellartwork method to the client class that takes an art object and a price. This method will create a new listing and add it to the marketplace. Before that, though, the method will make sure that the client in question is actually the owner of the art. You can't sell what you don't own. So I'm going to minimize listing, and I'm going to come over here to client, where we're going to add some new methods. First, we're going to come over here and define a new method, which is sellartwork. Pass in self as always, the artwork in question, and the price. Then we need to check if the artwork's owner is this client. So we're going to ask if artwork.owner equals self referring to this specific client. Once we're sure that this client owns the art, we'll instantiate a new listing object and use the addListing method from the marketplace class to publish the listing. So we'll make a new variable here, new listing, and we'll set that to a new instance of listing. And we're going to have to pass in the artwork, the asking price, and we're going to use self here for the client who owns it, because we've already confirmed that the owner of this artwork is self. Then, below this, we're going to use Veneer.addListing to add this new listing that we just created. Remember that addListing is a method of the marketplace class. Back below our class definitions, we can use the new sellartwork method from Edita to list girl with mandolin. We'll list it for 6 million USD. So From Edita, we'll use the sell artwork function that we just made. And we're going to be selling girl with mandolin. And we're going to list that for 6 million in USD, just like is shown in this task's instruction. Remember how Veneer.showListings didn't show anything earlier because nothing was listed? Let's move that call below the sell artwork call. So I'm going to cut this out and paste it down here. Now, when we save this, you should see girl with mandolin listed in the marketplace. The string you see in the console is from the string representation method in the listing class. The other side of selling is buying. We're going to end up having MoMA by girl with mandolin from Edita, so we'll add a buy artwork method to the client class. Similarly to sell artwork, we need to make sure that the buyer is not the owner of the art they are trying to buy. There's no reason to buy what you already own. So we're going to define buy artwork, and that's going to take in self and the artwork that is trying to be purchased. And kind of like before, we need to check if artwork.owner does not equal self. We can use this exclamation point equal to say not equals instead of does equal. Now we'll find the listing associated with the work of art. That is, we'll iterate over all the listings in the marketplace and set aside the one that has artwork as one of its properties. We'll save the listing as art listing if we find it, but what if we don't find it? That could happen if the art isn't listed for sale in the marketplace. We'll set art listing to none. If it doesn't get changed when we iterate over the listings, then the art wasn't for sale and can't be bought. So we'll start art listing off as none. Now we'll iterate over Veneer.listings. For each listing, we'll check if that listing's art property is equal to the artwork we're searching for. If it is, we'll overwrite art listing with that listing. So for each listing in Veneer.listings, we're going to check if listing.art is equal to the artwork that we're searching for. So we're checking in each listing that's listed in Veneer, and we're going to check listing.art, which gives us an art object, and we're checking that against this artwork, which is an art object that has been passed in to this method. And if we do find a match, we're going to overwrite art listing, which is set to none right now. We're going to overwrite that with the listing. As an optimization, we'll add a break statement here. This isn't really necessary with only one listing, but imagine if we had thousands of listings in the marketplace. Break will stop iterating over Veneer.listings once it finds a match, allowing the search to take less time. If the art is owned and listed, we can make the sale. We'll update the art's owner and remove the listing from the marketplace. To make sure a listing was found, we can check if art listing is still none. If it is, there was no listing. So we'll tab back over, and if art listing is not equal to none, we can move on. Now we can update the art's owner property and use Veneer.removeListing to take down the sale. Remember that the owner is a property of artListing.art, not just artListing. So artListing.art.owner, we're going to set that to self because this is the client that's buying the artwork. Then we'll use Veneer.removeListing, which is a method of the marketplace class, and we'll remove that art listing that we found. We used edita.sellartwork to list girl with mandolin. We'll use MoMA.buyArtwork to finish the transaction. So at the bottom of our program, we'll write MoMA.buyArtwork, and we'll pass in girl with mandolin. If we print out girl with mandolin again, we should see that the last bit of information, the owner and location, has changed. So we'll print girl with mandolin one more time, and we'll save that, and you can see that it appears again, this time owned by MoMA and located in New York. We'll add one last Veneer.showListings to take a final look at the marketplace. So that's Veneer.showListings, which should print out every listing in the marketplace. Now, nothing should show up in the console because the marketplace is back to being empty. Girl with mandolin was unlisted in the BuyArtwork method. Some might say a work of art is never truly finished, so you might want to add more features to the marketplace. One of the best ways to learn is to challenge yourself to add things without step-by-step instructions. See if you can add a feature on your own. If you need some help getting started, I'll give you a hint about the first suggestion in this task. To add a wallet to each client, you'll need to add another parameter to the constructor of the client class. Update the instantiations of edita and MoMA to include a dollar amount. In client.buyArtwork, make sure you subtract the amount from the buyer's wallet and add it to the seller's wallet. Good luck! In this project, we used Python classes and objects to build an art marketplace. We created classes for art, clients, listings, and the marketplace itself. We went back to our classes several times to add new functionality as we needed it. That cycle of constantly expanding your classes is pretty essential to object-oriented programming. I'm Matt for Codecademy. Happy coding!